Welcome to the Eskrima podcast. My name is Jason Enai, and I'm an Enai Escrimador, and I'm working from home today, so getting ready for the memorial tomorrow. First day is tomorrow. Pretty excited about our guest instructors from Stockton Multi-Style, our Master Miguel Ruby from Dos Pares, and Mushtaq Ali Ansari for Chamandi Salat, as well as collaborating with my students of many years, Lahon Guru Chris Castle and Guru Lauren Dew, and we should hope to see, one of my teachers, Masarip Sosuro, Frank DeFanti, who learned under my father, who taught me, who learned directly from Angel, Max, and Leo. So pretty excited about that. It's been a busy week as far as preparations are concerned, and also work and then teaching classes. Thankfully last night I was able to take a back seat to teaching, and Lahon Guru Chris and Guru Lauren were able to teach some Sinawali and also show empty hands translations for that, which is always good. I was able to practice a little bit on my Kadina Damano solo training, and work a little bit on my Serrada solo training. So that's good. Train every day. My dad used to say that your basics should be like brushing your teeth. You should do it at least twice a day. So, I don't necessarily make twice a day, but I do teach and or train every day but Sunday, unless I'm traveling or I have a private lesson for teaching. And then, I also, manage to lift and realize that rest is a big part of training when you train that often and teach that often. So the challenge there is not in training enough, but not training too much, which is a struggle for someone like myself who is a workaholic and also really enjoys in engaging in and sharing and developing myself within the passion for Filipino martial arts, and specifically my family system, the United System of Eskrima. So, but a lot of thought has gone towards legacy this week in terms of my family system, and how you prepare for following generations. I had a conversation at the gathering for the Martial Arts Collective Society with Nick Merchant, who is the WCAF world champion for his weight division. He's a Serrata player under Guru Jeff Finder. And, I talked to him, as well as I talked to Brian Parker, who was on the podcast earlier this week, about, how you develop yourself, how you develop others, and how you develop the curriculum with the mind not for yourself necessarily, but also has to include yourself and the generation that you're teaching, but also think 2 or 3 generations further. Your curriculum and the design of it and the execution of it is a big part of the United tradition. A great deal of the structure that we see coming out of Stockton is at least partially, if not heavily, influenced by the Enai family as a result of my father's structuring of Serrada Eskrima under Grandmaster Angel Caballas, which is evident still to this day through their ranking curriculum, the angle system that they teach, and the process through counters and whatnot that are done in order to make the curriculum easily consumable, right? And by that, I mean it's easy to learn, digest, and get the basics at the very least. And Serrata is a very deep art. The traditions that come from the Stockton community for FMA are very rich and deep in not only history, but depth of the art itself. The big players when I was a little boy and my dad was a young man learning were, definitely Grandmaster Angel Caballas, definitely Grandmaster Leo Huron, definitely, posthumously Grandmaster Max Sarmiento, but also Juan Lacosta, right? Who a lot of times in the Stockton legacy community, they don't really talk about Manongjani. I have instruction for that particular set of curricula from two different lines, from Master Al Conception, a colleague of my father's, a senior, to him under Manong Angel, a lefty, right? And my uncle Danny Nasano. So, tomorrow is the first day of the memorial for the 23rd annual, which we've been holding from day one. So, that's, important to remember and contribute and promote and propagate the art and the legacy, but also to, beyond tomorrow, is Wednesday, is actually the anniversary of his passing. And so usually a very difficult time for me, as I lost, in losing my father, I lost my teacher and my mentor, which are not all the same thing. They have very different things. There's a lot of people that teach martial arts, but mentoring is another level, which my father, focused on for myself in terms of, having this idea that I may at some point decide to take over the system, which is a conversation that we had many times that, require more than just understanding the art, but understanding community, understanding the personalities involved, being aware of them, understanding where we align and where we don't, and understanding that that's okay for you to not completely align with everybody in the community, as long as we're, hopefully moving forward towards preserving and propagating Filipino culture, specifically Filipino martial arts, right? And then thinking about generations ahead. And my father was really good at that, really good at thinking about like what it means to start a curriculum, design a curriculum, the after effects of that curriculum, and the logical progression of how the curriculum should be delivered, but not only that, but also how it should be developed, because we have to think about, what our end goal is. Always keeping your mind on that end goal. It's really not to be an Eskrima, although that should be towards the end, right? But something that you should hopefully reach relatively soon. There's a need from the point of view of just self-defense that your efficacy is reached rather quickly, because the need for self-defense doesn't wait until you're ready. So curriculum has to be designed that way, but also like how do we go from designing a curriculum, delivering that curriculum, to installing that within another individual for one of two purposes. A time capsule, for lack of a better term, where someone can learn and teach that art, maybe not dig very deep, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're satisfied with just, the cover of the book, or if they just want to move forward with other things, right? To the person that's going to make all the sacrifices to really absorb that art, really represent that art, that system, and move it forward into future generations, which is what my father was doing. And that was his mission. That's the mission I accepted as the head of the system when he passed. And so we've been thinking about that and what that means, and when you're looking for a protege, and what that person needs to be able to do along those levels. It's my hope that the work that my father did and that I've continued really does at least provide the possibility of a platform for the art within the Anayan system of Eskrima and the Anayan tradition to continue to adhere to the quality that we see in the people that my father taught, right? The Anayan tradition, if you will, is about the arts, individual styles. There's that component, making sure that we're true to the Largo Mano that we learned, the Cinco Terros, that we were taught, and that was taught to my father and my father's most senior students like Frank DeFanti, my uncle Remy Estrella, right, and a number of other individuals like my uncle John Peterson, whom all had their own learning experiences from the three main instructors that my father had, which was, Great Grandmaster Angel Caballas, Grandmaster Emeritus Leo Huron, and Grandmaster Max Sarmento, right? They all variously, I think my Uncle John was able to learn a little bit from Leo and from Angel, but not Max. And my Uncle Frank learned from Angel, Max, and Leo, and my Uncle Remy learned from Angel and Max. And then, I also had the opportunity to learn from my Uncle Jimmy Tacosa, who learned directly from Mono, Angel, and Leo, and also taught Kadena to Mono, right? And my Uncle Al, whom is a colleague of my father's that my father wanted to learn from in later years, whose art is Serrada from Grandmaster Caballas and Cacoy Doce Pares, as I understand it. And specifically, actually, it was San Miguel that he learned, not so much the Cacoy stuff, so I misspoke there. And then Topado, Negros Occidental Topado, and, from Mono La Costa, Grandmaster La Costa, what is commonly called the La Costa method or La Costa Kali. And then take this, tradition and this legacy and preserve it both as a movement signature and its efficacy, because that's just that one part, the art. But the other part of that legacy is a tradition. Traditions of Anayan are heavily influenced by the anecdotal methodology with which Grandmaster Sarmento taught, the structuring that is prevalent in Serrada, Eskrima, and the anecdotes and teaching methods for Cinco Terros, at least by Grandmaster Emeritus Leo Huron and his experience in World War II. So there's the art, there's the code, and there's the tradition. The code is the ethics that my father really espoused. He really believed in an ethos for warriorship. The Anayan Code of Conduct is honor, respect, veracity, justice, ethic, loyalty, discipline, rule, and conduct under my father. Chief among those for my father was loyalty. And his thing was not only just a loyalty to him, a loyalty to the art itself, the system, and a loyalty to the vision that he had. He had this vision that his legacy would leave a lasting impression of a community of people that he had helped develop, and that they would work together and they would work in alignment with their purpose, which unfortunately didn't really happen, which is very common in martial arts communities, right? Where, suddenly everybody wants to be the leader. So, and that's a normal thing. And we have to prevail on that level. And it's without that ethos, no, we can't, right? Not truthfully, not honorably represent. So a lot of thought has gone into the legacy of martial arts. And it's interesting because, I've participated in a number of organizations at different levels, participant, advisor, and then also as a leader. Currently, I lead the Anayan Training Organization. When my father was around, I was helped direct business and develop business for him, and helped create a whole circuit of seminars for him and a new network for him when he was still around and I was just a senior instructor, essentially what we would call like a 5th degree black belt or something like that, if that's important to you, to just kind of understand the leveling, right? To now being the president of another organization called Kilahana Martial Arts Association and providing guidance and leadership for that organization. And a lot is discussed in that side of the martial arts and experience in terms of legacy, in terms of ethics and ethical problems that an organization has to, overcome as they encounter in terms of a code of conduct, a proper behavior, and representation, right? And people are funny about that because then you start getting into identity. And that's what the legacy does give to people, is a certain sense of identity. You know, I'm a martial artist. I'm a Filipino martial artist. I do the Inayan Eskrima or Inayan system of Eskrima, right? I'm a student of so-and-so. Well, those are all identity statements. And so a legacy helps develop that in the individual, helps to, if not set the target, at least knock the arrow and pull it back and at least provide trajectory, right? The target is as much an organizational as it is an individual thing, right? And legacy, especially if you're looking at someone who's supposed to represent the art in the system, you're going to teach them differently. You're going to train them for different situations that you wouldn't just someone that's your protege that's really good at the martial arts, or is a live-in student, or is, you know, a favored student. They're just certain considerations that one has to meet in order to be able to hand someone an organization to do a transition, right? Like, you know, I was there when Professor J passed, and you know, the way that small circle jiu-jitsu was supposed to be led forward, right? You know, and I learned about other organizations that my father was involved with, that we saw those things happening from Kempo and Karate and Taekwondo organizations, and the participation with, you know, great people in organizations like Hanshi and Soke Marty Farrick in Florida, who's a great student of my father's, and, you know, has always been a good supporter of the United System of Eskrima and United Training Organization, really understanding how to go about establishing legacy. And then you have great people that are doing great work in their own way for their own designs, but great work nonetheless. You know, you can't discount Grandmaster Darren Tabone's, you know, consistent and persistent pushing of the Stockton legacy and the Serrata traditions in the community that he can touch, that you can see the great work that my Uncle Dan Insano does for the 35 plus Filipino martial arts instructors that he has been influenced by and been lucky enough to learn from. And I'm lucky enough to learn from him, right? As well as my father and my Uncle Frank and my Uncle Jimmy, my Uncle Remy, my Uncle John, my Uncle Rob, my Uncle Perry, right? All these different people that really helped develop a tradition. Because a tradition is not only the ceremony of teaching the art in a particular way with particular elements, right? It's interesting, like if you're in tech and you're learning how to do agile development or Scrum development, they use the terms ceremonies and artifacts, right? A ceremony is a particular kind of meeting or process that people would get together to do to achieve a particular goal. And an artifact is something that either guides that ceremony or is something that's produced from a ceremony, right? For us, the ceremony of class, the ceremony of particular exercises that, you know, I see SLD does, or rather Stockton multi-style does, that we also do in the United System of Eskrima, ceremony or tradition of particular exercises and drills that are, if not unique, give uniqueness to the United System of Eskrima that we have to continue to maintain. And then also understand that tradition is something that evolves and grows. It can't be something that just sits in time. It's not meant to be something cast in amber, right? A legacy has to be a living and breathing thing that is maintained with its roots and traditions, but also continues to flower new fruit, right? And that's something that we have to look at in the organization, in the art, in the code, the tradition of it, and the individual. I mean, I often say to my students that thank you for letting me be your teacher, right? Because a teacher isn't a teacher without a student or students, right? And it requires a certain kind of commitment on the part of the teacher, because there will be a lot of students, but there will be very few teachers, relatively speaking, in terms of statistics. But the teacher has to make the greater sacrifice. He can't or she can't decide that, I'd rather, pick up beekeeping for a year, or, I have a new partner, so I'm going to spend my time doing that, whether it's, whatever pastime, whether it's dancing or they like to do painting and wine, whatever it is, right? So you can't stop doing that and still be considered a teacher. I mean, my title, Suro, is the Ilocano verb to teach, as I understand it from my Ilocano teacher, Zyler. And, without the teacher and without the students, the tradition and the legacy dies, right? So it's this synergy of the people before you and the things that were done before and what you do now and what you do in the future. Your kadaanan and your kataanan and your kabarwan, your old way, your current way, and your new way of doing the art, right? My great-grandfather's art was called Kadaanan Eskrima, and he was from Ilocos. And, my Kadaanan is what my father taught me and what he learned, and understanding that, and my teachers, of course, by extension, under him, and his colleagues like Monong Al and my Uncle Dan, right? And then it's what I'm going to do with that tradition now, that code, that art, right? And how that has defined a trajectory forward, again, keeping with your roots, maintaining a certain sense of propriety when it comes to, as a good instructor, having a relationship with those that came before you, having a relationship with colleagues that are equal to you in some way, shape, or form, or even trained with you, right? Having a relationship with your teacher or teachers if you still have them in your life, and seeking out new teachers that are appropriate, right? And that selection process is pretty specific according to my father. And also having students that are older than you and students that are younger than you, and being able to teach children and adults and law enforcement, military, and having that robust, well-rounded community around you that pushes forth a legacy and tradition that's rich and strong and beautiful and resourceful to each of its individuals. It counts as a resource of strength and home and bayanihan, community, ohana, for each of its individuals. And that's a really important part. Sometimes we forget that about martial arts is, what we're talking about right now, legacy and tradition. And we're inured with the better punch and the better throw and how I could disarm, or whether it's a real technique, and, how, one art will invalidate another art and make fun of it, right? And, all of those things, which are interesting and fun at the same time, but they also detract to the value of each of the individual arts. If we understand arts from the point of view of a continuum of, I don't know how to fight, I'm not capable of fighting, I'm afraid to fight, I'm afraid to stand up for myself, I'm not a part of anything bigger than myself, etc., to a metamorphosis, a transition, a transformation of confidence in oneself and a sense of community and connectedness with people of like mind and like interest and like values, right? And bringing that forth and realizing it's not just for me or just for you, but for the next generation. That we forget about that because we get, I do, Eskrima, and that's better than karate, and I do karate, which is better than taekwondo, and you guys are all funny because I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and you guys don't even do a thing, and it's not even for real because I do Krav Maga, and that's real street fighting. In a way, they are that, right? But they're so much more than that too, and that's important for us to understand that all of that is part of a tradition. And it's rich and beautiful and wonderful to be a part of, whichever part that you're a part of, whichever art that you're a part of, and that you are its shepherd, and that you are its steward. And whether your part is to be a student or to be a teacher, to be a master instructor, a grandmaster, which is a role and a responsibility and an obligation as much as it is an honor and a title, right? And to be in charge of an organization in general. That's a privilege, an honor, and an obligation. And sometimes we forget that in replacement because we're punching and kicking and throwing and knives and sticks and swords, and we bring firearms into that and all that stuff. And we got to come back to an art, a code, and a tradition. Anyways, I look forward to seeing you guys in the at the memorial if I get to. Otherwise, I'll see you on the training floor. Like, subscribe, comment. I post and ghost a lot, so forgive me if I don't always answer, but I usually do. And make sure that you take advantage of our in-person and online training, which is in the links are in the description, of course. And I'll see you on the training floor.